Okay, welcome everyone. If you can hear me, let me see a thumbs up. If you can hear me, let me see a thumbs up. Danielle, can you hear me? Maureen, thank you for joining us. Can you hear me? Mohammed, can you hear me? Oh, good. Great. Okay, so just give more minutes. I would increase the volume of the music while we wait for more people. I would advise you share with your network so they can know that we have started the series for today. Thank you for joining us, Abayomi. I would advise that we share with more people. We are starting shortly. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the DEIB Small Talk. Welcome to our live event here on LinkedIn. We are excited to have you here. We're very much excited to see people joining us. This is still being streamed live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and of course, here on LinkedIn. Trying to change my screen. Okay, good. Okay, so welcome to DEIB Small Talk. Like I said earlier, this is a live series or a live event brought to you by Bavarde Talent Solutions. You are just joining us for the first time. If you are just joining us for the first time, give us some likes. Let's welcome you. Let's applaud you. Welcome, Kubana Kwabana. Kwabana, you're going to pardon me. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you can hear me, you can please give some emojis and let me know that you can hear me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So today we have a different topic here. This is the month of September, and every month, what we do is we take one topic in diversity, in DEIB, trendy issues, and we discuss about it. We started this series in August, and we've had tremendous success. We've had speakers talk about trending issues, talk about sensitive issues when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness. This month of September, we have cultural diversity as our topic, or let's say as the theme for the month. And I have with me an amazing guest speaker. Of course, you know her if you've been following us. She appeared on our first series, and that is Stephenson. But before I introduce Danielle to host, I would like us to share this program. Let's share this program so more people can join us. Since this is the first time we're having it as an audio event on LinkedIn. However, this is still streamed live. This is the DEIB Small Talk, and if you're not familiar with that word DEIB, it simply means diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness. And trust me, it's a very common word, and hardly will anyone say we've not heard of that word. And that is why we have today's show and our show as DEIB Small Talks, because we will bring in trending issues and we discuss it so we can provide solutions and also be change agents in our organizations and to our organizations. In the month of August, we talked about diversity in promoting and incorporating diversity in promotions and transfer structures, and we had varieties of speakers with different of opinions and point of view perspectives. We had this program every other Monday, and each of our speakers went in different dimension. We started from practices and policies, looking at how we can incorporate diversity through practices and of course through policies. In our second series, we looked at how we can incorporate diversity or DEIB by eliminating biases in hiring line managers, and of course in the HR team as a whole. And the last series of the month of August, we had the immigration series where we talked about how immigrants can also exhibit and incorporate diversity. Even an organization can also incorporate diversity and accommodate immigrants in terms of policies and also practices. This month, it is cultural diversity. I know I haven't introduced myself, but I'm going to introduce myself shortly. Meet me, I'm Florence. I'm a human resources and talent acquisition business partner with both corporate agency, employee support service, digital transformation, team alignment, people analytics, and of course DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. In the last years, I've positioned partners with organizations in ways that connect. Okay, that it is the interest. arguing that DEIB policies
positions. So I've always taken that viewpoint to bring in workplace diversity into business strategy.
Thank you very much, Danielle. It's nice to have you here, and also nice to have Kwabena. Thank you for being our listener today. Oh, Kwabena, can you hear us now? I just received a message that said you cannot hear anything. Kwaba, Kwabena, if you can hear us, can you give a reaction? Okay, I would advise that you log out. Maybe you go out and come back in. I know I can hear Danielle, and Abayomi also said that he can hear us clearly. So I just want to make sure that whoever joins next can also hear us clearly. Okay, sorry for that delay. I would say whoever cannot hear us through the audio can join us via the video, and the video is working. The internet is back, and it's now streaming live. Okay, so now we are back to the show. Danielle, I would say if you can mute yourself for some minutes, because of the interference. So I would say we're back to the show and we are talking about cultural diversity. Oh, we all know what cultural diversity means. It's a very vast topic, very vast subject. We're talking about race, we're talking about ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, gender, age, disability. Cultural diversity, it's almost like saying we're talking about the whole topic around diversity itself. But today we have a unique topic, and the topic is just one sentence, anyways, and it is cultural supremacy in modern day organizations. We want to talk about the cultural supremacy in modern day organization. We all know, we are all aware that the issues around diversity has to do with supremacy and of course minorities. Who is superior and who is minor? We are not going into we're not going to specific issues around cultural diversity. We're not going into specific issues, but we want to look into cultural supremacy in modern day organizations. So we want to look into just three topics, I would say, maybe three topics or two, actually just two, is we want to see what cultural supremacy is. I can see that Danielle is very excited. She wants to talk. She wants to go into this. She's ready to shake the table. But we want to go into what cultural supremacy is in organizations, and we want to see a way that we can maybe eliminate by having a shared culture. But I'm going to allow Danielle to take the floor. And my first question is, first of all, to understand what we understand by cultural diversity. So, Danielle, what do you understand? What is your definition of cultural diversity before we go into the topic?
Well, cultural diversity means a lot of things. Workplaces have a variety of cultural definitions. And I apologize. There's a lag when I'm talking, so
No,
it's confusing me. So let
there
me see
is
if I
no
can.
there is no lag.
And for me, there is
Oh,
technology. Sheesh. Anyway, when we talk about cultural diversity, we're certainly talking about all those visual aspects of an employee. Of the things we see, the things we don't see that you covered in the earlier introduction. But in the context of work, there are multiple cultures within a work that have to do with how the organization and all the employees work together, whether they have a clan culture, a purpose-driven culture, a market-driven culture, a culture of innovation. So all of those things come into play, as well as the diversity of that workforce, whether it's race, gender, sexual orientation, those sorts of things.
hmm. Cultural diversity. Okay, thank you very much for that. I won't go into what cultural diversity is, or
Okay,
I would. Okay, I won't go into that. I won't start the debate from there. We'll start our debate from cultural supremacy. So now we've had what Danielle's Stephenson, Danielle's definition is of cultural diversity. You know what my definition is because I said that earlier. That was the opening conversation of my definition of cultural diversity. If you have a different definition, I would like you to share it on the chat. Share it on the chat. Let's know what your own definition of cultural diversity is so we can begin to see where issues are and we can know where to tackle. But today, the topic is still cultural supremacy in modern day organization. So now, my second question goes, what does the topic now? Cultural supremacy in modern day organization, what does it mean to you?
It was interesting when I saw that. I'm like, what is that? And so honestly, I had to Google it. And so it seems like it overlays everything that happens in the U.S. and probably in Europe as well. In that the historical context of how this country was, the U.S. meaning how it was discovered, and the institutions, the processes, the structures, all of those things still have play a strong, I guess they play a huge impact on workforces and companies today, and that's from the public sector, the private sector, as well as nonprofit organizations. So the dominant, say, culture or dominant race in terms of just the sheer number of white individuals that are in the companies, that tends to predominate everything that an organization does. It's an underlying reason why there are fewer women in leadership roles, why there's not as much diversity as reflective of the total U.S. population. So those things play a significant part in everything a company or an organization does. I think that what we're now beginning to unpack and address is how that hinders everyone in the society from living, say, the American dream. And so it's an important
Not sure what's going on. Not sure what went wrong, but I'm listening to you. Okay, so cultural supremacy to me actually is the same thing like what you've just said when we talk about what's going on in the United States, what's going on in Europe or outside of any continent. Actually, even within, I'll say, even within Africa, we still have some culture that see themselves as as superior to another. So, cultural supremacy is a thing that has been going on for years. Is a thing that has been embedded in everyone's worldview, everyone's organization, everyone's country. It is not something that is going to go away over the night. But one thing is, we all know that no one culture is greater than the other. Every culture, no matter the differences and similarities, are superior. But today we're looking into cultural supremacy in the modern day organization. We're looking into cultural diversity, how everyone, even the white, even the people of color, we share the same color. You're even brighter than me. You have a lighter brown than I do. And that also means that I have a different culture from you. I have a different perspective, worldview from you. So now in organization, we do have organization culture. But one thing I have noticed in organization culture, which I want us to talk about, is the fact that organization culture is still being dependent on a particular culture. We all go to the organization. Can you hear me?
oh yes.
So we all go to an organization. We all work for an organization. We do our daily activities, morning to evening, 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever way it's been structured. We spend most of our times and we have only 2 days to ourselves. Well, thank God for hybrid now. At least we have some days like I'm currently at home. But one thing is, even though I'm at home, I still have to exhibit, possess, show the culture of my own organization. But this one thing that I have noticed the trend is that an organization culture still reflects a dominant culture.
Well, absolutely. I think that, it's typically the majority of the people in the organization can also set the tone. So while there may be little offshoots of individuals and their how they approach work is going to be a little bit different, but that the majority of the employees that are there, particularly in the higher ranks, um, they really do set the tone. And I think that, as we talk about people bringing their authentic selves and companies welcoming that, I think that's definitely a double-edged sword in that sense, because we want people to bring their authentic selves? Because sometimes I don't feel very, the bubbly, happy person. So what I think organizations want is us to be consistent, whatever that is that we've projected, and the type of work style we have, the way in which we communicate. They just want that to be consistent. And I actually borrowed that from Seth Godin. He's I'm a huge fan of his writing. And he gives the example of if you go to a Jay-Z concert and if he had a bad day, the roadie, the setup wasn't great, you don't want him to come out there and complain about all those things. You want him to be consistent and be what you expect him to be. And so I think that that's important. I also think that from a cultural perspective, you talked about our differences in skin, like shades or skin color. I didn't grow up with the colorism that you may hear a lot of, Black Americans say, and probably other, and, I grew up in Texas, so there's, lots of other cultures that have the colorism thing. I didn't grow up with the hair texture thing. So I don't bring those views into work in terms of how I interact with people. I also didn't buy into what more tenured or older workers that were, say, Black Americans told me was to keep your head under the radar. Don't make waves. You just coast. That's not my style. So I think that as we look at how much a dominant culture affects us in the workplace, we have to look at what are those impressions that we got from our parents, our schools, our teachers of how we should behave in the workplace. I may be fortunate or unfortunate that I've sometimes been the only person in my department of the 35 plus years I've worked. So it's something that I can't blend in. I'm 5'10". I'm not going to blend in. I don't if there aren't any people there that look like me, but there are women. I don't necessarily align myself with just because I'm a woman, which a lot of Black women do. If they're the only one, they'll align with women. I will, but I'm aligning as a Black woman. I don't I don't check any of those things at the door. And I think that's important as we look at having the predominant culture evolve and be more accepting. We have to own the parts that we've played in being small and wanting to fit in and blend in on things that we really can't change about ourselves.
So now, when organization says we should bring our authentic self, like you just mentioned, or bringing our authentic self actually means not blending in. Actually means standing out, being distinct, be unique. Do your thing, let me do my thing for the collective goal and objective of the organization. But this still poses another issue. And the issue is everyone wants to shine, but there's only one spot to shine. So how can we resolve those issues when everyone has different culture? Organization says bring your authentic self. How can we resolve issues around the cultural diversity or cultural differences while trying to incorporate or while trying to accept the organization set culture? Like for instance, my organization will say we're very collaborative in nature, which we actually are. But even in our collaboration or collaborativeness, we can still find some distinct people with some characters that may be uncollaborative. But at that stage, the organization begins to do the analysis of if 80 or if 70% is collaborative, then the outliners we can ignore.
That's a really good point. And I think that there's an amazing man. He's Edward Bono. He has his six thinking hats, and they're different colors. And when you put on these hats, the exercise is to have you think in that way, so that if we're all collaborative, we're all, this particular hat, we're going to all agree on whatever the topic is.
Hmm.
And then everybody has to participate. And then we switch another hat. And then that's the hat that says, no, we don't agree with this. What's wrong with this? Why won't this work? So it allows for that person that say not as collaborative. They're the ones that want to throw a wrench maybe in an idea or what the group is talking about. It gives everyone a space to do that. And I think that that's something that organizations don't do very well. And this is something that's taught to, Nobel Prize winning, scientists as well as kindergartners, because it's a very simple method. And I think that if more organizations embrace that, they would definitely see a big difference in how they're able to execute their business strategies. And, when we talk about culture, we're there for a shared purpose typically because we believe in the mission, the values, and what the company's trying to accomplish. So we have that one thing in common, but then we have all these other things. And I think doing an exercise like the six thinking hats would help with that. There's also another strategy that the military uses. It's a red team. So red teams are ones that really poke holes in a strategy or a plan to see why it would fail. And then they work, and that's important because you don't want to test something that are into battle or something someone's overlooked a major aspect of it. And I think organizations need to do that as well. Rarely have I been in a meeting and the host says, okay, we've talked about, we brainstormed about how we're going to make this happen. I rarely have heard someone say, okay, why do you think this won't work? And giving that person a voice to say, well, I don't think it'll work because X, Y, Z. And I think that's important with intellectual diversity and how people think and how they process information. I think, with advances in neuroscience, we'll start seeing, I think, a lot more of that as we start integrating into cultures. There's a wonderful guy that when GE was at their heyday, Ned Herman, he was a physicist that Jack Welch put in charge of organizational development. And Jack Welch, I think, gave him $1 million and said, figure this out. Because he said people are more complex than left brain, right brain. So he did that. And then looking at those thinking preferences, they were able to get diverse teams together and even talk about the challenges that they're going to have when they interact with one another. And I think that's important to help move a process along or move an organization along and have people rise to the top and being able to value different perspectives and not just the dominant one because we act and agree with whoever's the highest ranking person in the office, which has typically been how people have, moved up in an organization.
Which is typically means how people have moved up in an organization, and that is so correct. Because if we're going to talk about even the mentorship program that we have in the organization, the succession planning we have in the organization, it's very shocking to know that the quota, I believe it's a quota system. It has to be a quota system because everyone begin to we have the isms now. We begin to have bring all over the isms from favoritism to nepotism to ageism, and everyone chooses according to their isms and biases. Of course, I have my bias, you have your bias. We are aware of that. Everyone has biases. We cannot remove that because that is one of the things that actually make us human. It's part of our gut feeling. But now we are aware that our biases sometimes may not be the best solution, especially when you're dealing with cultural diversity. You're dealing with people from different backgrounds, people from different social, economic environments, backgrounds. Now, let me go back to the mentorship. You want to have organizations talk about the succession plan, and one of the very good way is through mentorship programs. Train someone, coach someone, so that this person can take over you when you leave or grow old. There's some organizations that they have very high level of loyal employees, loyalists, and they stay 20, 30 years, sometimes from the beginning to the end of their career. And the organization has a succession plan that says train or coach this person, mentor this person, so that this person can move along the ladder, maybe take over your position as a director, VP, whatever. But one thing is, everyone would always want to choose who looks like them.
Sure. You're absolutely right, and I think that this is where we go back to what is that business strategy. If someone is, and I've worked at organizations that are 100 plus years old, where people have had their whole careers there. I think that it's incumbent upon HR professionals, and that's where the biggest work needs to happen. We talk a lot about operations, but it's really HR, because in terms of succession planning, in terms of mentorship programs, who gets in, how it's defined, who's chosen to be a mentor. There are a lot of maybe unofficial leaders who know more about the company and should be the one developing people than an executive vice president. So I think that, one of the first things is looking at, say, we're just talking about succession planning. When we're looking at that, what I see often is that organizations are just looking at it at where the company is today. They're not looking at where's that long range plan of we want to be 3, 5, and that's not that long range, but where do we want to be 3, 5, 10 years from now? Okay, so the person who's picking his or her successor, does that person even understand what the market is going to be like 5 or 10 years from now? As the companies want to compete more globally, and there's some huge markets that it seems like, just even from a political standpoint, we spend a lot of time insulting one of the biggest markets that we want to break into, that also manufactures a lot of the stuff that we need here. So I think that we have to look at, where is the organization going? Where are new markets? If you're only looking from an European centric viewpoint about where new markets are, then your company's not going to be around, because that's just not where things are happening right now. And I think that that's incumbent for HR professionals, and really for them and that the chief HR officer, to look at, to understand where the business is going. I know a lot of times HR professionals, we're not spending a lot of time in operations meetings. We may go to one, or when they're rolling out a strategy, but we're not there weekly to understand the business. So we're relying on mid 20th century assessments to determine who's going to take the place of this other person. And I think that that's the biggest gap, and that's the first place that they should start. And then in terms of mentoring, this notion that I see a lot of companies, which is, there's nothing wrong with having the MBA programs, the MBA internships and that high level, but a lot of people at lower levels are very bright, and they don't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily dictate that those are the only ones getting into the more plumbed mentorship programs. I think that organizations have to look across all of their environments, and decide the profile, and that's a mix of skills. And then we also have to look at competitors. A lot of companies who were competitors 10 years ago aren't today, and then those, and who their competitors are today, won't be the ones 5 or 10 years from now. And I think that, so we have to have the strong internal look, but also be cognizant of how the world is changing and how quickly it changes, and what that could mean for an organization, before you start slotting the same old into those places. Is really important.
That brings me to one important aspect in organization, which is awards and recognition.
Yes.
Awards and recognition. That is another issue around culture supremacy. You move with people you like, of course. You move with people
Absolutely.
you know. You move with people you're comfortable with, people you probably collaborate with, people that you can say, even out of work, you can call into them. You're very comfortable with them. Everyone has their clique and sections and groups, many
Yeah.
groups in an organization. That's, we cannot take that away. But when it comes to award and recognition, what is your take looking into the topic cultural supremacy? Because I personally, I know that so many people of color has been denied the recognition they deserve.
Mhm. And again, this goes back to looking at our HR professionals, looking at how we evaluate talent. Companies review employees and give recognition. They're just trying to check a box. We're trying to make sure we're compliant. We're not. I don't see many HR professionals, because those documents are so long. Sometimes they're 5-10 pages long. They're not going to read all of those if it's
Mm-hmm.
if they have maybe 35, 1,000 employees under their purview. So I think first of all, those things need to be shortened, so they're not that detailed. So you can look at that and evaluate it. And then even looking at that, once performance appraisals are complete, they're entered into an HRIS system. So those reporting should be run on race, gender, tenure, and grade of those employees, so you can start beginning to see a pattern. Gee, it seems like all white males are consistently given, one or fives, and other people aren't. And then that starts with, then you circle back, why is that? And then you start pulling reviews and reading them. And then in that instance, you can see, well, this person got the exact same writing on the review, however, the scoring was different. So that's important. And those are the next steps that should be done when we're doing recognition. The other thing is, I'll have to send you the study, but it was one that looked at people of color in leadership roles often grade other people of color more harshly.
Oh yeah, that was the second topic.
Yeah. So we have some things around that, and I think it's this thing where we take on, say, as a Black woman, I think that everyone that I hire or everyone that I would mentor or have in my organization, if they misstep or they do something wrong, it's a reflection of me. And my mother actually, so this is years ago, she said, we sometimes take on a whole view of, if something happens in our community, it's a reflection on all of us. She said,
Mm-hmm.
do you think, and this is really old, she said, do you think that CEOs felt that what Timothy McVeigh did in that Oklahoma bombing typified was representative of them? She goes, no, they could care less about, they cared about it, but it was not something they internalized and said, oh gosh, young white males, they're a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we move into leadership roles, because we're so uncomfortable in those positions, we don't want anybody else making us look bad, not realizing that your contemporaries, the same people at your level, they've hired people that haven't worked out.
Mm-hmm.
They've mentored them to get them back on track or giving them some additional resources. We're seeing very hesitant to bring on talent that looks like us, that has potential, because for fear that they won't do a good job and it'll make us look bad.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if your success is really that shaky, I think that those types of leaders need some counseling. They need some coaching, executive coaching, because those are things that often will hold us back. Because if a company has put you in this role, they expect you to know more about that culture, because you've come from it, to assess talent, to provide the resources that they need, because we have a deeper sense of knowing, but we don't often behave that way. And is that our fault, or is it the white supremacy culture's fault?
Okay, I would leave that for the audience to answer. Is it people of color's fault, or is it white supremacy fault? Because I believe that we need to move away from always blaming, doing the blaming game now on everything on white supremacy. There are certain times that we ourselves, as people of color, or I as a person of color, find it very difficult to break some out of some circles, patterns, because I'm used to that pattern, I'm comfortable to that pattern, and when I get the opportunity to move out of my comfort zone, I sluggishly move, and sometimes find it difficult to go with people. I just don't want us to blame anyone. I don't want us to blame the white supremacy, because I know that we have that issue. And one thing that we've been looking at over the years is ways that we can solve this issue. And if we want to continue the blaming game, it's just going to be no one is going to take responsibilities of what should be done
Absolutely.
and what shouldn't be done.
Well, absolutely. I had an experience where I recruited an engineer, and because we had some goals to meet diversity, and everyone dragged their foot, so I stepped in and hired this person. And he started orientation at one facility in the South, and then they moved to another one. And the leader of that facility said, I hear you're a racehorse, so I'm going to run you like a racehorse. And so at this time, I was, people sleep with their Blackberries. I was definitely one of those crackberry addicts. So I remember getting this email on Sunday morning that his resignation, and I'm waking up calling like, because I'm in Seattle, so 3 hours time difference. And so I said, what happened? And he tells me this, and he sends an email to me and the executive vice president of that division. So just these two people. And he's like, oh, hold on. And then he and I talk. I said, well, I'll talk. I'm going to call him now. Let's talk tomorrow. Because again, I'm not going to call this person back on Sunday. I need to process what just happened. And so I remember working with an HR male as an higher level than I did. And his response to me was what I needed to understand, that this person who said, I'm going to run you like a racehorse, he didn't mean that. And I educated this person, and hey, you're Canadian, and woohoo. I said, but what you don't understand is that you don't equate Black people to animals, and specifically Black males. And so and honestly, I said, I don't need to understand the GD thing. And that was just me. That's my authentic self in that moment. And and then he just, froze because he's not expecting that type of interaction. But I'm like, this is a young man that I recruited him so hard his parents knew when I called. He's in a place where it's one of those states where the highway can be adopted by the clan. So he's in his new car, and he keeps his work ID and his visor and his offer letter and his business card, because he's not going in the glove compartment. So I'm not going to put this young man in harm's way and keep him there when this is the type of thing that when we talk about a work family, and we got a culture of supporting one another. I had a choice then. I could have, you're right. And yeah, he was out of line, and I'm, and accepted the response that he gave me, but that's not who I am. And so he didn't talk to me for a whole year, and that was fine. I tried to apologize and said, probably shouldn't have said that word, but at that time, you need to understand what this means in the U.S. And so, he finally got over it, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to lose any sleep over it. And it probably went around, in some meetings I wasn't a part of, but the operations side understood. So we moved the guy back to another facility, because this guy doesn't get rewarded for his treatment of another, of someone like that. And I think that that's some of the stuff that we have to, I would say, if I hadn't taken that response, then not to blame, I would have been the one at fault.
Yeah, and that would have been a trend. That would have been a trend that would continue in the organization, because if someone does not speak up, then everyone believes it's fine by you. It's fine by you to be insulted.
And that was the culture. You keep your head under the radar, and you don't make waves at this company. And I'm like, this is the same place that I talked about Emmett Till with another leader, because he was from Mississippi. So I just, that's just how I am. And I think that we have to look at, when you talked about recognition, I got a lot of recognition at that company, but I will tell you, it was all from operations leaders in terms of awards and those things. I think I rubbed HR, my colleagues the wrong way. But it was about understanding the business and getting things done. And so I think that maybe we should look at awards of a challenger award. Who was someone that made me uncomfortable in a meeting, but I realized it was right? Or a strategy, who made me think differently? Those are the kinds of things that we need to start looking at, as opposed to all the people who acquiesce and just model right behind us. I think companies that are innovative, that do that, they can raise the bar, on how they do it, and letting a lot of other types of people in variety of levels in the organization be a part of those creative meetings and be a part of the Challenger Award. Why not? Give them a whole bunch of money for having the courage to challenge.
I do understand the fact that sometimes qualitative any how would I put this now? Not data, because that's what comes to my head, but performance. Now looking at performance evaluation, if it's not quantitative, it's very difficult to measure, it's very difficult to track. So that is why sometimes talking about awards that are qualitative in nature, for instance trust, I cannot quantify it. It's always very difficult to give recognition on, because the moment you start giving recognition on maybe trust or challenge or who is the best problem solver, if it is not attached, or if it does not involve data, quantitative data, then there's going to be a lot of controversy around it. Speaking from the HR perspective, I do understand. We try to move away from qualitative and do only data tracking, data analysis, and measure those that we know that's very quantitative in nature. And that is why for operation, it's very difficult to get awarded recognition in anything that has to do with operational, because that way we can see the impact. It's very measurable. And when we talk about the return on investment to the organization, the KPIs, the KPDs, you can always do those, you can always have those KPIs because you can measure them. But for qualitative, character, attitude, best,
Those are very subjective.
yeah,
It's really hard because
it's very hard.
what I would say is trust uh, is very different than maybe what someone else thinks is trust. Collaboration is because oftentimes, are we collaborating doing the best for the business, or are we collaborating to do the best for ourselves? And a lot of times in meetings, even if I don't agree with something, okay, if I don't agree, I don't agree. No, I say that, but other individuals I don't agree with this, but I know that this person has my future at this company in their hand, so I'm going to agree with them because I don't want to upset them. So we're our trust or our honor is tied to, we're not doing the best for the company, we're doing the best for ourselves. And I think that that's something, again, individuals have to internalize and determine what line they want to walk. But I want to sleep well at night, and I do, and I don't want to feel like I have been untruthful to myself.
Hmm. That's so correct. That's very correct. Okay, let's move over. There was one point that you made that I wanted to comment on when we're talking about some certain functions that actually HR should take full ownership for. For instance, HR being a business partner. I'm not talking about the HR business partner. No, I mean HR itself being a business partner with organization. One thing I've come to know, trends that I've studied, which I've built a business model around, is being a business partner as an HR personnel or HR professional. And one thing is that HR of nowadays, it's very difficult. I know there are different trends. People are beginning to strategically move away from the operational aspect of the human resources to being a strategic partner with organization. So now, what will be your take? How can we encourage or advise HR leaders, the VP, we know them, the directors, how can they position themselves to be business partners, not just the operational mindset or the mini strategic mindset? Because HR, one thing I've discovered when HR start talking about being strategic, they're talking about how they perform the succession planning, the employee relations, employee engagement, surveys, and bring and do the analysis, present the results. Yes, I know those is going to help the organizations, but what other aspects can HR look into for them to position themselves as business partners so they can also help eliminate and integrate this cultural diversity so that organization culture can be a success?
Well, I think the first thing HR individuals should do should spend a lot of time being the recipient of diversity training, not the ones that are just giving the training. So to help them internalize the role that they've played in perpetuating a certain culture or stereotype of how employees are successful. Yeah, I've said this before that I think women are the reason women don't make as much as men, because once a budget is approved, operations is not really caring about what the woman gets paid. But so many times I've heard HR business partners say, we don't want to pay a woman that much to come here to our company. And I'm like, well, she already makes as much. Some of the people she's going to be managing, they already make more than her, or they will in their next performance review. So she's going to find out. Let's just use, we know the, the historical nature of how women are paid, just bump her up to bring her in. Those battles. And I've just moved away from that and, had conversations with operations people, and they're like, yeah, well, we should do that. But I think the other thing is HR people need to spend some time in business classes and understanding just how an organization operates, whether, if they're large enough to have a learning department, a big one that can teach them some basics of how businesses operate, even how to read an operating statement. Knowing those kinds of like SG&A planning, they need to understand that. The other thing is if they are specialized within specific groups, whether it's, software development or it's a manufacturing, having the department, and they can be co-located. I know it's difficult now with what's happening with COVID, but now that travel opened up a bit, they should spend some time, walking around. I think it was Tom Peters that said, this management. It was a totally 80s management theory, but you manage by walking around. HR people, are they in the departments that they support if there's not a problem? If they're not there to terminate someone or there to do an investigation, they're not there. So I think that it's getting them out of their offices and also helping them understand they need to develop some more extroverted sort of tendencies and be a little bit more open to learning new things. Of the business as well. That will help them so they can begin to speak the language of business and look at when they're in those operations meetings where they're reviewing things, they're able to look at some people components when it doesn't. For instance, like if a group is not performing, they can, again, with an employee roster, to look at who's that manager. If this failed to execute, was it because there was poor leadership? Was it because there were poor, there was some just oneness thinking with the team who was deciding? That's how we can encourage more diversity in an organization. You go, hey, all these people went to the same, Ivy League. They all have MBAs, So that was just one type of thinking. So this is most, they need to do some analysis because it seems like a very simple answer, but just to test that theory of if you had some different thinking people, there are people with a different perspective that also look different because we bring in different thinking as well. That perhaps you would have wasted millions on something that didn't go right.
Thank you very much for that. Answer. So let's look into two more excuse me, two more areas I want us to look in. Let me just catch my breath. Okay, so two more areas that I just want us to look before we open up for questions and let the audience ask questions is the first one is establishing corporate guidelines. And one of the areas where I want to go into now is this. Okay, I think I need to cough. Just give me a minute. Okay, so one of the areas that I want us to look into now is when organizations are talking about the DEI policies and bringing in consultants, external consultants, and having the internal employees to sit in committees and talk about DEI policies or practices. And one way that I have noticed over the years now, since the past 2 years now, is how many percentage of DEI consultants actually understand DEI problems. I'm going to let you talk. The reason I'm going there is
Yeah.
organizations come in and they bring in, no offense or no offense intended right now, but they bring in someone who has not gone through the experience of being underrepresented, or someone who has not been a BIPOC in that group, the BIPOC now. And this person is going to represent or is going to share the ability for the BIPOC to express their voice. Now, this is like, I'm going to use this analogy when a mother wants to give her children food and she shares it in different quotas, different portion, and says, "Okay, this is yours. You sit here. This is yours. Sit here. This is yours. Sit here." But this person now, this is not. I think the mother is not a good example. Let's say an auntie, an external auntie, extended family comes and said, "This is." But a mother itself understands, you eat a bigger portion than this. This is where equity comes in now. You have a bigger, you need a bigger portion, or you eat more, or you don't like sweet things, or you don't like sour things. The mother understands that.
Mhm.
But the aunt coming from the external home or family does not understand. So now organizations are also exhibiting this character. They're bringing someone that's maybe he's an ally. I don't know. As I said, no
I don't
offense
believe in
intended.
bias.
No
So,
offense intended. But
yeah.
I just want us to talk about it. Maybe an ally and believes that this person understands the pain of being they call us the minority group, of being the minor in the minority group, or this person understands the pain of being underrepresented, or this person understands the pain of being the first generation to go to school, and this person comes, sit on that table and detects that, oh, I believe that the Asian, they're lacking this. I believe that the Latinos are lacking that. I believe that this is this. What is going to be your take on that? Maybe
Well, I
I'm
think
wrong.
that no. There's a woman that her book is so popular. I think every organization is reading it. And she was a big consultant in Seattle for a long time, and we've got a lot of problems still here. And I said, if you're hiring people who are repackaging Black and Brown voices, um, and selling them to you,
Mhm.
you meaning an organization, you're not ready. And I think that from, again, coming from operations, we think about human resources or personnel departments, they are supposed to be the experts on people.
Mhm. Very
Yet,
correct.
we, uh, however, um, they are often the head of HR departments are now becoming chief diversity officers. So, and that's been a trend in the last few years, and it's definitely upticked since 2020. So, if you're the chief of anything, you should know how this works. And I think that, again, we're giving people passes on their accountability because you didn't. I've said this a few times, but in our last conversation, but it didn't take 2020 in a 9-minute video for you to realize something was wrong. You have create what was wrong, and you need to own that. And I think when we hire consultants, we're going to hire people that make us feel comfortable. We don't want to be challenged in that sense. On the other side of that, because there's a risk. I mean, people, self-preservation is what the first law of nature. So people don't want to do things that make it uncomfortable for the organization and their leaders and threaten their position. So, this goes deeper into I guess, individuals' core values and what they're willing to do. And I think that if you're hiring a consultant, organizations really should be honest. Do you want to look good? And do you want to not get in trouble from a governmental compliance standpoint? Do you not want bad press for your organization? Because that means if you're publicly traded, your stock value is going to go down. If you're a governmental agency, that may mean you're not elected the next, the highest ranking person is not elected. Understand where, that is a component. So understanding where, where your soft spot is. And then I don't think that people who are not representative of a group can really speak for that group. I think that if they are a consultant, where do they get their information? How do you know this? And I think even just a simple question companies can ask a potential consultant, who are your tell me the race of your closest friends and your gender and their ethnicity. Again, someone that hasn't shared an experience, I can't necessarily tell you what an Indigenous woman would be like, or an Asian, American woman. However, I can't even tell you what our Black women want. But what I can tell you is where I have gone and gotten this information and had it, sort of validated. But I do think that organizations, it's back to this profit off pain. We have to look at how much of our society is built on how individuals can make money. And if individuals see an opportunity and they know that some aspect of who they are, whether it's what they look like, where they went to school, can give them a leg up on making money, they will absolutely do it. So that's back to that profit off pain. And again, if we're relying on people who have been at an organization for a long time and heading HR organizations for years, and they don't have any inkling about how to address this issue, with regard to making workplaces more diverse and more equitable and more inclusive, you have to question, why are they in these roles? Because the policies and the practices that companies have, they're based on state, usually city and federal law. So it's not that hard to understand what sort of right and wrong. And I think that that's where it has to be. And we have to be comfortable in saying that. And again, we were talking about BIPOC community. I'm not sure even in a first, second generation East Indian woman can be a diversity consultant or head of diversity organization. And I see, in no disrespect, I don't know any personally. However, of the ones I've seen and things I've written, where have you garnered your information? How have you learned this? And there's, as I say, there's no shame in my game. If you can prove that you know this and you've gotten input and you take this back to your think tank and your collective, then the respect is given. But what I see is just some brown and black mouthpieces that are just going to perpetuate what has always been.
That's so correct. That's so correct. That is so correct. So many. That is now the new trend. Is, oh, you're black, you're brown. Be the chief diversity officer, even if you do not understand the pain, because you're coming from a minority, does not mean you understand the pain of the minority, and that does not mean. Please go on.
Oh, that's also that the notion of the model minority. So the ones that groups of immigrants that were told, you keep your head down, you assimilate, you don't make waves, you don't challenge anything, you don't raise an issue, because you're still going to be a minority, but you're going to get more than the people below you. And so for some, that's perfectly fine with them. And I think that if you're putting those people into leadership and to help steer the ship because they make you feel comfortable, you want to make sure that they've done the work and you're really kind of prepared to be uncomfortable and comfortable to move the organization forward, because if it's publicly traded or it's a community-based organization or it's a nonprofit, you still have to deal with people not wanting to change and understanding how uncomfortable that is. And we still need to make it comfortable for white heterosexual males who don't have a disability, not in the military, if it's equitable, it should be equitable for everyone. And so this taking away from, Biff to give to Tyrone, that's not going to sit well with Biff. So how do we bring everyone along together? And I think that's a piece that's missing right now, because we're giving a lot of space to people talking about this one group that's done all these things wrong. Well, that group still has everything that we want, so we might need to reframe our language and how we interact.
Thank you very much. So let's just go to shared culture. We've mentioned various issues. We've highlighted some solutions, but let's say how can organization have a shared culture? But before you answer that question, I want our listeners, wherever you are, you can always send in your question. If you have a question, we're happy to answer as much as we can. Just send it in the comment section in the chat. We'll read it. I will read it and make sure that your question is answered before the end of the show. We're coming towards the end, and that is why we have this last question that's going to close this topic, which is shared culture. We've talked about the culture supremacy. We've talked about the minority and the superiority. But now, how can organization have a shared culture, a shared background, so everyone can be collaborative and fine?
I think that companies, they have their vision, their values, their all of these things that they espouse. But how is that woven into every day? How is that woven into a meeting? So if we have a culture of collaboration, looking at when we have trouble collaborating, maybe it's a work style. I'll tell you, being from Texas, being a Black female in the Pacific Northwest, they call it the Seattle freeze. People, and it's, if you Google Seattle freeze, I'll tell you, people are often passive aggressive. I would say more so men too, but a lot of women. And so, if we're looking at organizations, kind of in that way, how do we, if it's collaborate, I'm not being difficult. I want to collaborate. I want to buy into this, but I can't because I'm missing some key information. So that's how I interact in a meeting. However, the presumption of that is that, God, this person is being difficult. They don't want to collaborate. I do. You just need to explain it to me. Or what I see often is that people look like they're collaborating in a meeting, and the meeting's over. They spend time trying to undercut whatever the decision was we made. And as a group that we were collaborating. So I think understanding those, how cultures behave, and if this is part of your culture, then you have, again, that's when the six hats thinking can come into play, because you give people a safe place to say why this won't work. And everyone has to wear all the hats. So if you refuse to wear any of the hats where you totally agree and support it, you can't just wait till the turn that when they're bashing a hole in it. You've got to play it's kind of like a round robin. You can do it really quick. Get a couple minutes around the table, everybody say something. And I think that those kinds of things can make a difference in terms of what we value. And then, what does that look like for everyone? If we're talking about the good of the company, does it make sense that we all collaborate and agree and support this? And then if we can't, how do we weigh that risk? And that's where, again, different thinking people can come in. Is it a risk that the organization or the team can live with? I mean, I like it, but can I live with it? Sure. I think that those are the conversations that should be had as meetings are winding down and as we review the notes and the action steps. Bringing that soft side into it that starts to have people feel like their voices are being heard. And then if someone's really upset, you have to spend the time to have a conversation offline. Like, really, what, I didn't get it. We ran out of time. Tell me why this still bothers you. And then give them that floor. And then, okay, I don't understand what you're saying. Help me understand it. How did you come to that conclusion or that feeling? That makes a difference, and not just shutting people down. With the hybrid work model, we've got a lot of time, and we spend a lot of time working when we probably shouldn't be working, but that's what technology gives us. But with that, how can we make this better? And not shut someone down so they don't engage, and then a recruiter calls them and then they're gone. I think that that's a big thing that we definitely have to look at now with all these quiet resignations.
Yeah, that's the new trend, quiet resignation. Thank you very much, Danielle. I see that we did not receive any question yet. Let me make sure. But I just want to use this opportunity to say thank you to those who stayed with us from the beginning, and those who left midway, and those who are still with us. Thank you for joining us. I will just give a quick summary of what Danielle has said. Is so far we talked about cultural supremacy in modern day organization, and we've had a very in-depth conversation around this topic. It seems like what are we going to talk about? But man, we had a lot of issues to talk about because issues around diversity, it's something that is as old as a culture. It's as old as a person that has been given birth today begins to experience certain differences. Nose is different from a nose is a boy different from a girl, and nose is a girl different from a boy. So, and that is where the issues begin to come in. But this unity, the unity in our differences, goes a long way.
Yes.
There was just this message that I'd like to read. Is I saw this online and I liked it, and it said that this is from Everfi, Everfi Blackboard. They said something. They're talking about diversity, cultural diversity, and they said that with the strength of a diverse workforce, your business will be better equipped to meet the challenges of today's economy and be in a better position to reach a broader cross section of the market. I'll just copy this quickly and highlight it. So this is from Everfi. Don't want to go into trouble. So this is Everfi from Everfi Blackboard. So once again, it says, with the strength of a diverse workforce, your business will be better equipped to meet the challenges of today's economy and in a better position to reach a broader cross section of the market.
And I love that. And to your point, that's a what, companies know what to do. Like, okay, if we have a diverse workforce, this will mean a lot, better performance for us. But I think that often the how is missing. And I think, this conversation speaks to the how. You were asking, how do HR people move from the operational administrative work to being strategic? How does, uh, in terms of awards and recognition, how do we look at those differently? What does it mean to collaborate? What mentoring programs look like? What do succession plans look like? It's an incredible time for, HR professionals to look at elevating what they do. In the Davos, yeah, they're the future strategists, and it talks about our fourth industrial revolution, and is HR 4.0. What do we need to do differently to help our organizations survive and thrive? And I notice when they're business books, they're rarely written by HR people. They're always leaders, and talking about people and those kinds of things. And I think that maybe we're content to play in the background, but I think that strong HR leaders can really make a difference in understanding this. But first, starting with themselves, and not just being a place where they just pass through diversity education and these. Uh, uh, Meeting a workforce without looking at their own departments first and making some changes within and internalizing what they need to do to change.
Hmm. Thank you very much for that contribution. So I would say that we've come to the end of today's show. I will just highlight one more thing, which is my own submission, and that is, let those who have the message be the voice. Let those who've experienced the pain say their story. Let them lead their story. Thank you for joining us today. Once again, my name is Florence Idowu. Like you can see on the screen, and this is DEIB Small Talk, brought to you by Bavarde Talent Solution. Mind you, if you need a trusted organization that can help with your DEI issues, policies, strategies, implementations, initiative, call on to us, and our team of DEI experts will be able to assist with that. Thank you very much for staying with us, and to have a blessed day.